In the mountains of Afghanistan, where silence can mean survival and one wrong move determines who goes home, Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez learned that sometimes the impossible becomes possible. When everything you've trained for collides with everything you never expected to face.
What started as a routine patrol in hostile territory became a legend whispered in military circles the day a single sniper with an Mk-13 rifle turned the tide of battle in ways that defied every tactical manual ever written.
This isn't just another war story. This isn't just another war story.
This is the account of how one person's extraordinary skill, unbreakable determination, and split-second decision-making saved an entire unit from what seemed like certain annihilation. The enemy thought they had the perfect trap. The terrain was on their side. The numbers were overwhelming.
The element of surprise was theirs. But they made one critical mistake. They underestimated the person behind the scope who was about to rewrite the rules of engagement in the most spectacular way imaginable.
Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez adjusted her position behind the rocky outcrop, the weight of her Mk-13 sniper rifle familiar and reassuring against her shoulder. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rugged Afghan mountains, painting the landscape in shades of brown and gold that could hide an army if they knew how to use it.
She had been in this position for 3 hours, watching the valley below through her scope, every sense heightened to detect the slightest movement that didn't belong. The mission had seemed straightforward when Lieutenant Colonel Hayes briefed them at Forward Operating Base Shank 2 days earlier. Intelligence suggested that a high-value target, a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks on supply convoys, was moving through the Wardak province. The plan was simple. Establish overwatch positions, track the target's movement, and coordinate with ground forces to either capture or eliminate the threat. Rodriguez had earned her position as the unit's primary sniper through years of dedication that began long before she ever set foot in Afghanistan. Growing up in rural Texas, she had learned to shoot before she could properly tie her shoes. Her grandfather, a Korean War veteran, had taught her that shooting wasn't just about pulling a trigger.
It was about understanding wind, distance, breathing, and most importantly, patience.
Every summer spent hunting deer in the hill country had been preparation for moments like this, though she couldn't have known it at the time. The military had refined those natural skills with precision training that pushed her beyond what she thought possible. At the Army Marksmanship Unit, she had learned to calculate ballistic coefficients in her head, to read wind patterns from the movement of grass 1,000 yards away, and to control her heartbeat so completely that she could time her shots between the spaces where her pulse wouldn't affect her aim. Her instructors had recognized something special in her approach to long-range shooting, a combination of mathematical precision and instinctive understanding that couldn't be taught, only developed.
Now, 3 deployments into her military career, Rodriguez had become the soldier that commanders requested by name. Her record spoke for itself. 47 confirmed kills, all at ranges exceeding 800 yards, all in situations where failure would have meant American casualties.
But numbers didn't capture the full story of who she was or why she had chosen this path. The choice to become a sniper hadn't been about killing. It had been about protection. Every shot she took was calculated not just for accuracy, but for the lives it would save. When she looked through her scope, she didn't see targets. She saw threats to her brothers and sisters in arms, people who had families waiting for them back home, soldiers who deserved the chance to complete their missions and return safely. Her spotter, Sergeant First Class David Chen, lay beside her with his spotting scope trained on the same area. Chen had been working with Rodriguez for 18 months, and their partnership had developed into something that bordered on telepathic. He could read her breathing patterns and predict when she was about to take a shot. She could interpret his wind calls and range estimates with complete trust, knowing that his calculations were as precise as her execution. Movement at 2 o'clock, approximately 1,200 yards. Chen whispered, his voice barely audible, even though they were alone on the ridge.
Single individual, moving east to west along the goat path.
Rodriguez adjusted her scope, finding the figure Chen had spotted. Through the magnification, she could see a man in traditional Afghan clothing carrying what appeared to be a rifle.
He moved with purpose but not urgency, following a route that intelligence had suggested might be used by their target. Negative identification on the target, she replied quietly. Wrong build, wrong age profile. This was the challenge of their mission. In a landscape where nearly every adult male carried some form of weapon for protection against wild animals or bandits, distinguishing between legitimate threats and civilians required careful observation and strict adherence to rules of engagement.
Oh.
Rodriguez had never taken a shot without absolute certainty that her target posed a direct threat to coalition forces.
Below them in the valley, the main element of their unit was positioned in what appeared to be a routine patrol pattern.
12 soldiers led by Captain Morrison were moving through the area, ostensibly conducting a presence patrol but actually serving as bait to draw out the Taliban commander and his security detail. It was a dangerous game, using American soldiers as lure, but intelligence suggested that the target had become confident enough to engage smaller units directly.
Rodriguez respected Captain Morrison's willingness to put himself and his men in harm's way for the mission, but it made her job more critical.
If something went wrong, if the plan fell apart, she and Chen might be the only thing standing between the patrol and disaster.
The radio in her ear crackled with quiet communications as the patrol maintained contact with command. Their voices were calm, professional, but she could detect the underlying tension that came with operating in territory where the enemy could be anywhere. Watching, waiting for the right moment to strike.
Overwatch, this is Ground Element, Captain Morrison's voice came through her earpiece. We're approaching Checkpoint Alpha.
Any movement in your sector? Rodriguez keyed her radio twice, the agreed-upon signal for negative contact. The patrol continued its movement, following a route that would take them through a narrow valley where the surrounding ridges provided excellent concealment for an ambush. Chen shifted slightly beside her, adjusting his position to maintain observation of a different sector. Weather front moving in from the northwest, he noted. We might have wind changes in the next hour. Rodriguez nodded, making mental adjustments to her calculations. Wind was one of the most challenging variables in long-range shooting, especially in mountainous terrain where air currents could change dramatically with altitude and topography.
She had learned to read the environment like a language, interpreting the movement of dust, vegetation, and even the flight patterns of birds to understand how the air was moving at different levels.
The Mk13 rifle she carried was perfectly suited for this kind of work. Based on the Remington 700 action and chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum, it could deliver accurate fire out to 1,500 yards in the right conditions. Rodriguez had spent countless hours customizing her weapon, adjusting the trigger pull to exactly 2.5 pounds, selecting ammunition that matched her rifle's preferences, and zeroing the scope to account for the specific ballistic characteristics of her setup. But the rifle was just a tool. The real weapon was her mind, trained to process multiple variables simultaneously while maintaining the calm focus necessary for precision shooting.
She could calculate range, wind drift, bullet drop, and target movement while tracking a target through her scope, all while controlling her breathing and heartbeat to ensure that nothing would interfere with the shot when the moment came. As the morning progressed, Rodriguez noticed changes in the pattern of activity in the valley.
Small groups of men appeared at various points along the ridges, individuals who seemed to be observing the American patrol rather than going about normal daily activities. Chen spotted them too, calling out positions and movements that suggested a coordinated effort to track the soldiers below. We're being watched, Chen said quietly. Count at least 6 individuals in overwatch positions. Rodriguez had reached the same conclusion. The pattern was too organized to be coincidental. Someone was coordinating surveillance of the American patrol, which meant their target might be in the area and preparing to act. The radio traffic from the patrol remained routine, but Rodriguez could sense the growing tension. Captain Morrison was experienced enough to recognize when things didn't feel right, and his soldiers were alert to the possibility that they were walking into a trap. Overwatch, ground element, Morrison's voice carried a new edge. Request immediate status report on your sector. Rodriguez keyed her radio. Ground element, Overwatch. Multiple individuals in observation positions along the ridges. Count 6 to 8 possible hostiles maintaining surveillance on your movement. There was a pause before Morrison responded. Copy, Overwatch. Continuing mission. Rodriguez understood the captain's decision. They had come here to find the Taliban commander, and the presence of watchers suggested they might be close to success.
But she also knew that the patrol was now walking deeper into what appeared to be a carefully prepared killing ground. The Mk13 felt heavier in her hands as she realized that the routine mission was about to become something much more dangerous.
Through her scope, she watched the patrol move through the valley while unknown enemies positioned themselves in the surrounding hills. Every instinct told her that violence was coming, and when it arrived, her skills would be tested in ways that no training could fully prepare her for. Chen checked his range card again, updating his calculations for the changing conditions. Wind picking up from the northwest. Approximately 8 knots, gusting to 12. Rodriguez made the necessary adjustments to her scope settings, preparing for shots at various ranges and angles. In her mind, she rehearsed the sequence of actions she would need to take if the situation deteriorated. Identify the most dangerous threats first, calculate firing solutions for multiple targets, maintain communication with Chen for spotting and range estimation, and coordinate with the ground element to avoid friendly fire incidents.
The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning haze and creating the kind of clear visibility that could work for or against them depending on who acted first. Rodriguez felt the familiar calm that preceded action, her body relaxing into the shooting position while her mind sharpened to laser focus.
Below in the valley, 12 American soldiers continued their patrol, unaware that they were about to become the center of a battle that would test every tactical principle they had learned and push one sniper to perform at a level that would become legend among those who knew the true story of what happened in the mountains of Afghanistan that day.
The first shot came without warning, echoing off the mountain walls like thunder in a clear sky.
Rodriguez saw the muzzle flash from a ridge position approximately 900 yards to the southeast, followed immediately by the distinctive crack of an AK-47. Below in the valley, one of Captain Morrison's soldiers dropped behind cover as dirt erupted near his position.
Contact! Contact left! Morrison's voice exploded through the radio as his patrol scrambled for defensive positions among the scattered rocks and low vegetation of the valley floor.
Rodriguez was already tracking her scope toward the source of the first shot when Chen called out, "Multiple muzzle flashes, ridgeline east and southeast.
Count at least 4 firing positions!"
The carefully planned ambush was unfolding with devastating precision. The Taliban commander had chosen his ground well, positioning his fighters on the high ground surrounding the valley where the American patrol was now trapped.
The geography that had concealed the enemy observers now provided them with interlocking fields of fire that turned the valley into a killing zone. "Overwatch! Ground element!" Morrison's voice carried the controlled urgency of a leader under fire.
"We need immediate fire support on the eastern ridge, taking heavy casualties down here." Rodriguez found her first target through her scope, a fighter positioned behind a cluster of rocks, firing down into the valley with methodical precision. The range was 847 yards according to Chen's laser rangefinder, with a crosswind of approximately 10 knots from the northwest.
She made the necessary adjustments to her scope, accounting for bullet drop and wind drift while controlling her breathing. The MK-13 spoke with authority, its .300 Winchester Magnum cartridge cutting through the thin mountain air with deadly accuracy.
Through her scope, Rodriguez saw the impact, watched the enemy fighter collapse behind his position. But there was no time to confirm the kill or feel satisfaction. The radio was alive with desperate communications as the patrol fought for survival below. "First target down," she reported to Chen while already searching for the next threat. Shifting to target 2. The battle had transformed the peaceful mountain valley into chaos. Automatic weapons fire echoed off the rock walls as Taliban fighters poured fire down from multiple positions. The American patrol, caught in the open with limited cover, was fighting back with everything they had, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Rodriguez found her second target, a machine gunner who had established a position on the northern ridge and was raking the valley floor with devastating fire. The range was longer this time, nearly 1,000 yards. And the target was partially concealed behind a large boulder that provided excellent protection from ground-level return fire. She waited for a pause in the enemy's firing, knowing that the machine gunner would have to expose himself to reload or adjust his position. Patience had been drilled into her during countless hours of training, and now the discipline was literally a matter of life and death for the soldiers below. The machine gunner shifted position, moving just enough to give Rodriguez a clear shot at his center mass. She controlled her breathing, let her heart rate settle, and squeezed the trigger with the same smooth precision she had practiced thousands of times on ranges from Georgia to California. The second shot was as accurate as the first. The enemy machine gunner disappeared from his position, his weapon falling silent. But even as Rodriguez achieved her second kill, she could see that the situation was deteriorating rapidly for the ground patrol. "Ground element Overwatch," she transmitted while searching for additional targets. "2 hostiles down on the eastern positions, but you've got more movement on the southern ridge. They're trying to flank your position." Captain Morrison's response came between bursts of gunfire.
"Copy, Overwatch. We're pinned down pretty good here."
"Can you do anything about that southern position?" Rodriguez swung her rifle toward the southern ridge, where Chen had spotted new movement. What she saw through her scope made her blood run cold. At least 6 fighters were moving along the ridgeline in a coordinated flanking maneuver that would put them in position to fire down into the patrol's only available cover.
"Chen, I need ranges on the southern ridge.
Multiple targets moving in tactical formation.
Her spotter was already on it, calling out distances and wind conditions as Rodriguez tracked from target to target. But even as she prepared to engage, she realized the mathematical reality of their situation. She could kill individual targets with precision, but there were simply too many enemies for one sniper to neutralize before they completed their flanking movement. The radio crackled with increasingly desperate communications from the patrol.
2 soldiers were wounded, ammunition was running low, and the enemy was tightening the noose with professional skill that suggested they were facing experienced fighters rather than untrained militia.
Rodriguez took her third shot at a fighter who was advancing along the southern ridge, dropping him at a range of 723 yards.
But even as that threat was eliminated, she could see more movement in positions that had previously appeared empty. The Taliban commander had planned this ambush with far more fighters than intelligence had suggested, and they were revealing themselves gradually as they moved to complete the encirclement.
Contact rear! The panicked voice of one of Morrison's soldiers came through the radio. They're behind us now! Rodriguez spun her rifle to scan the western approaches to the valley and confirmed what she feared most.
Enemy fighters had moved into positions that cut off the patrol's retreat route. The Americans were now surrounded, trapped in low ground with enemies holding all the high ground advantages.
This is the book. It's about history that KPI's doing papers.
Chen was working his spotting scope frantically, trying to identify and prioritize the most dangerous threats. Multiple targets, all directions.
This isn't just an ambush anymore. They're trying to wipe out the entire patrol. The realization hit Rodriguez like a physical blow.
This wasn't a routine engagement with a high-value target. The Taliban commander had used himself as bait to lure an American patrol into a carefully prepared killing ground, where he intended to achieve a propaganda victory by annihilating an entire unit.
She took her 4th shot, then her 5th, each one precisely placed to eliminate threats that posed the most immediate danger to the trapped soldiers. But for every enemy fighter she killed, it seemed like 2 more appeared in different positions. The Taliban had committed significant resources to this operation, and they were executing it with disciplined coordination that spoke to extensive planning and preparation.
Overwatch, ground element. Morrison's voice was strained but still controlled.
We need immediate extraction or reinforcement. Current position is not sustainable.
Rodriguez knew that help was at least 30 minutes away, even if command authorized an immediate response. The patrol had to survive that long against overwhelming odds, and she was their only fire support.
She shifted her aim to a cluster of fighters who were setting up what appeared to be a mortar or rocket-propelled grenade launcher.
The range was 1,156 yards, at the edge of her rifle's effective range, and the wind had increased to gusting patterns that made precise shooting extremely challenging.
Rodriguez took a deep breath, made her calculations, and fired. Through her scope, she saw the round impact just inches from her intended target, close enough to disrupt the enemy's setup, but not close enough to neutralize the threat completely.
"Damn," she whispered, immediately chambering another round. Long-range shooting required perfection, and near misses were failures that could cost lives. Her 7th shot found its mark, eliminating the enemy weapons team and preventing them from bringing indirect fire to bear on the trapped patrol. But the tactical situation continued to deteriorate as more enemy fighters moved into position from directions that hadn't been part of the original surveillance pattern.
Chen's voice carried a new urgency. "Maria, we've got movement on our position. 2 individuals, maybe 3, climbing the backside of this ridge."
The enemy had identified the sniper position and was moving to eliminate it.
Rodriguez realized that she and Chen were about to become part of the surrounded force rather than the overwatch element that could provide support from a position of relative safety. She made a quick decision that would have seemed impossible to anyone who hadn't spent years developing absolute confidence in their shooting skills. Instead of withdrawing to a more defensible position, she was going to stay and fight, using her rifle to engage as many targets as possible before the enemy could close on their position.
Chen, I need you to watch our Sikhs and call out anything that moves within 500 yards of our position.
I'm going to try something that's either going to save that patrol or get us both killed.
Her spotter understood immediately.
Rodriguez was about to attempt something that no sniper manual had ever described. Engaging multiple targets in rapid succession at varying ranges and angles, while under threat of being overrun herself. The Mk-13 had never been designed for rapid fire, but Rodriguez had trained with it extensively enough to know exactly how fast she could work the bolt action while maintaining accuracy.
She began a systematic engagement of every enemy position she could identify, starting with the ones that posed the most immediate threat to the patrol and working outward in a pattern that would disrupt the coordinated attack.
The 8th shot eliminated a fighter with an RPG who was preparing to fire into the patrol's position.
The 9th took out a sniper who had been engaging individual soldiers with deadly precision. The 10th and 11th shots disrupted an enemy assault team that was preparing to rush the Americans' defensive position.
But even as Rodriguez worked with machine-like efficiency, she could hear Chen calling out the approach of enemy fighters who were climbing toward their position from multiple directions.
The battle was about to become personal in a way that would test every skill she had ever learned and push her beyond the limits of what anyone thought possible with a bolt-action rifle. Rodriguez could hear the scrape of boots on rock behind her position as enemy fighters climbed the backside of the ridge.
Chen had his M4 carbine ready, but she knew that once they were engaged in close combat, her ability to provide overwatch for the trapped patrol would be finished. The 12 soldiers in the valley below would face the rest of the battle without sniper support, and their chances of survival would drop to nearly zero. That realization crystallized into a decision that would define the rest of the engagement. Instead of preparing for defensive combat on her own position, Rodriguez was going to accelerate her engagement of targets in the valley, attempting to break the back of the enemy attack before they could close on her position.
"Chen, how many rounds do I have left?" she asked while chambering her 12th cartridge. 18 in the current magazine, plus 2 full mags in reserve, he replied, never taking his eyes off the approach routes behind them. "But we've got movement about 300 yards out and closing. 18 shots to change the outcome of a battle. Rodriguez had never attempted anything remotely similar to what she was about to try. Rapid, precise engagement of multiple targets at varying ranges while under direct threat herself."
Every principle of sniper employment said she should displace to a new position, or prepare to defend herself with close-range weapons.
But every instinct told her that the next 60 seconds would determine whether 12 American soldiers lived or died, and she was the only person who could tip the balance in their favor.
She identified the most critical threats through her scope: an enemy assault team preparing to overrun the patrol's eastern flank, a machine gun team that had just established a new firing position, and a group of fighters who were setting up to attack from the blind spot in the patrol's defensive arrangement. The 13th shot took down the leader of the assault team at 934 yards, causing the coordinated attack to falter as the other fighters sought cover. Rodriguez worked the bolt with practiced efficiency, chambering the 14th round while shifting her aim to the machine gun position. The 14th shot silenced the machine gun permanently, but Rodriguez was already tracking to her next target before the enemy gunner had finished falling.
The bolt action of the MK-13 moved smoothly under her experienced manipulation, each cycle taking less than 2 seconds while maintaining the precise aim that made every shot count. Shot 15 eliminated the enemy spotter who was directing mortar fire into the valley. Shot 16 took down a fighter with a rocket-propelled grenade who was preparing to target the patrol's command element. Each shot was calculated for maximum tactical effect, chosen to disrupt the enemy's coordinated attack and buy time for the American patrol.
200 yards in closing, Chen called out, his voice tight with controlled tension. Multiple climbers, at least 4 individuals. Rodriguez could hear them now, the sound of equipment rattling against rock as enemy fighters worked their way up the backside of the ridge.
In conventional tactical thinking, she should abandon her sniper position and prepare for close-quarters combat. But conventional thinking wasn't going to save the patrol trapped in the valley below.
Shot 17 shattered the coordination of an enemy flanking movement, dropping the lead fighter and causing the others to scatter for cover. Rodriguez was working the rifle faster than she had ever attempted in training, muscle memory taking over as conscious thought focused entirely on target identification and shot placement.
150 yards. Chen's warning came as Rodriguez chambered her 18th round.
She could see muzzle flashes in the valley as the patrol fought desperately to hold their defensive perimeter, but the enemy pressure was relentless. The 18th shot eliminated an enemy commander who had been coordinating the attack from a central position. Through her scope, Rodriguez saw the immediate effect as enemy fighters began showing less coordination, their attacks becoming more disorganized without central direction. But she was down to her last magazine, and enemy fighters were climbing toward her position with deadly intent.
Chen had his rifle ready, but 4 or more enemy fighters against 2 Americans in a position designed for observation rather than defense meant that close combat would likely end badly for them. Rodriguez made another decision that would have seemed insane to anyone who hadn't spent years pushing the boundaries of precision shooting. Instead of changing magazines, she was going to attempt something that no sniper had ever tried in combat: engage multiple targets in rapid succession with perfect shot placement while under direct threat, using the final rounds in her current magazine to maximum effect.
"Chen, I need you to buy me 30 seconds, she said, never taking her eye away from the scope.
Whatever it takes. Her spotter understood. He shifted position to cover the approaches to their position while Rodriguez focused entirely on the targets in the valley below. She could hear gunfire beginning behind her as Chen engaged the climbing enemy fighters, but she forced herself to block out everything except the view through her scope.
Shot 19 was taken at an enemy fighter who was preparing to throw a grenade into the patrol's position. The range was 678 yards, and Rodriguez made the shot while the sound of Chen's M4 carbine echoed off the rocks behind her. The enemy grenade exploded harmlessly among empty rocks. Shot 20 eliminated a sniper who had been picking off individual patrol members from a concealed position.
Rodriguez worked the bolt action while bullets began impacting around her own position.
Enemy fire from the valley mixing with the closer engagement as Chen fought to keep climbers from reaching their location. She chambered round 21 and found a target that would require the most difficult shot of her career.
An enemy machine gun team was setting up in a position where they would have clear fields of fire into the patrol's defensive perimeter, but they were partially concealed behind rocky cover at a range of 247 yards. The wind had shifted, gusting unpredictably, and the angle required her to shoot almost straight down into the valley.
Rodriguez calculated ballistic trajectory, wind compensation, and target movement in the space between heartbeats. The mathematics were complex, but her trained mind processed them automatically, while her body maintained the precise shooting position that would allow the shot to succeed.
The 21st shot seemed to hang in the air forever before finding its target. Through her scope, Rodriguez watched the enemy machine gunner collapse, his weapon sliding down the rocks into an irretrievable position.
But even as she achieved another precise kill, she could hear Chen's firefight intensifying behind her. Round 22 was chambered as Rodriguez shifted to engage an enemy assault team that was preparing to rush the patrol's weakest position. The Americans below were running low on ammunition, and their return fire was becoming sporadic as they conserved rounds for the most critical threats.
Shot 26 and 2 stopped the assault before it began, dropping the lead fighter and causing the others to hesitate.
Rodriguez was working the bolt action with mechanical precision, each cycle smooth and efficient despite the chaos erupting around her position.
"Maria, I can't hold them much longer!" Chen's warning came between bursts of automatic weapons fire.
The enemy had reached the upper portions of the ridge and was beginning to establish firing positions that would allow them to eliminate the sniper team. Rodriguez chambered her 23rd round and made a decision that defied every tactical manual ever written.
Instead of engaging the immediate threats to her own position, she was going to use her final shots to break the enemy attack in the valley completely, even if it meant sacrificing her own chance of survival. Through her scope, she identified the remaining enemy positions that posed the greatest threat to the trapped patrol.
Mathematical calculations raced through her mind as she planned a sequence of shots that would disrupt multiple enemy positions in rapid succession, creating enough confusion and casualties to allow the American patrol to break out of their surrounded position. Shot 23 eliminated an enemy spotter who was directing fire from multiple positions. Shot 26 took down a fighter with an RPG who was preparing for a final assault on the patrol's command position. Each shot was placed with surgical precision, chosen for maximum tactical effect rather than simple elimination of targets.
Rodriguez chambered her 25th round as enemy fire began impacting directly around her position.
Bullets sparked off rocks near her head, and she could hear Chen's ammunition running low as he fought to keep enemy fighters from reaching their location. But through her scope, she could see that her systematic elimination of enemy leadership and heavy weapons was having the desired effect.
The coordinated attack on the patrol was beginning to fall apart as surviving enemy fighters lost communication and direction. Without central coordination, their overwhelming numerical advantage was becoming less effective. The 25th shot was Rodriguez's masterpiece of precision shooting. An enemy commander had established a position where he was attempting to rally his scattered fighters and reorganize the attack. The range was 1089 yards, the target was partially concealed, and Rodriguez had to calculate for multiple environmental factors while under direct fire herself. She controlled her breathing, steadied her aim, and made the shot that would break the enemy attack completely.
Through her scope, she watched the enemy commander fall and immediately saw the effect as surviving fighters began withdrawing from their positions rather than continuing the assault.
But even as victory in the valley became apparent, Rodriguez realized that her own situation had become desperate.
Chen's ammunition was exhausted. Enemy fighters were reaching the final approaches to their position, and she had no more rounds in her current magazine. The moment that would define her legacy was approaching, and she was about to discover whether the impossible could become possible when everything she had trained for collided with everything she had never expected to face.
Rodriguez ejected the empty magazine from her MK-13 and reached for a fresh one. Her movements automatic,
despite the bullets impacting around her position. Chen had shifted to using his sidearm, his M4 ammunition exhausted, but enemy fighters were now within 50 yards of their position and climbing rapidly. Maria, whatever you're planning, now would be a good time.
Chen called out between precise pistol shots.
Through her scope, Rodriguez could see that the enemy attack on the patrol had indeed begun to collapse. Her systematic elimination of leadership and heavy weapons had broken the coordination of the assault, and surviving enemy fighters were withdrawing from their positions. But the patrol was still pinned down, still surrounded, and still in danger of being overrun if the enemy managed to reorganize. More critically, she could see movement that suggested the enemy wasn't simply retreating.
Instead, they were consolidating into defensive positions where they could maintain pressure on the patrol, while sending fighters to eliminate the sniper position that had disrupted their attack.
Rodriguez chambered the first round from her fresh magazine and made a tactical assessment that would have seemed impossible to anyone who hadn't witnessed her shooting over the past 30 minutes.
The remaining enemy fighters were positioned in locations that offered excellent cover from ground-level fire, but were vulnerable to precision shooting from her elevated position. If she could maintain her rate of fire and accuracy for just a few more minutes, she could eliminate enough targets to allow the patrol to break out of their surrounded position and reach defensible terrain. The mathematics were brutal but simple. She needed to make every remaining shot count while enemy fighters climbed toward her position with murderous intent. Shot 26 eliminated a machine gunner who was attempting to re-establish suppressive fire on the patrol's position. The range was 823 yards, and Rodriguez made the shot while enemy small arms fire peppered the rocks around her own location. She worked the bolt action and immediately shifted to her next target, an enemy fighter with an RPG who was trying to get into position for a killing shot on the patrol's command element. Shot 27 dropped him at 967 yards, his rocket-propelled grenade detonating harmlessly against the mountainside.
30 yards! Chen's warning came as he engaged targets with his pistol. The enemy assault on their position was reaching its climax, but Rodriguez continued her methodical elimination of threats in the valley below.
Shot 28 took down an enemy spotter who was directing fire from multiple positions. Shot 29 eliminated a fighter who was attempting to flank the patrol's defensive perimeter.
Each shot disrupted enemy coordination and reduced the pressure on the trapped American soldiers. But Rodriguez could hear enemy fighters reaching the final approaches to her position.
Voices in Pashto called out coordinates and tactical instructions as they prepared for the final assault that would eliminate the sniper position. She had perhaps 60 seconds before close combat would make precision shooting impossible.
Rodriguez made a decision that would become the stuff of military legend. Instead of preparing for defensive combat, she accelerated her engagement of targets in the valley, attempting to create enough disruption to allow the patrol to break out before her position was overrun.
What it depends on doing 2 days one side of the ranges when passing back to a pencil, so don't you expect any of that?
Shot 30 eliminated an enemy commander who was rallying fighters for a renewed assault on the patrol. Rodriguez worked the bolt action faster than she had ever attempted, muscle memory and thousands of hours of training taking over as conscious thought focused entirely on target identification and shot placement.
Where are you in the city of Illinois?
Shot 31 took down a machine gunner at 1,156 yards, the longest successful shot of the engagement.
The enemy weapon tumbled down the mountainside, taking with it the suppressive fire that had been keeping the patrol pinned in their defensive position. Ground element overwatch, Rodriguez transmitted while chambering round 32.
Enemy coordination is breaking down in your sector. Recommend immediate breakout to the northwest, moving to high ground.
Captain Morrison's response came immediately.
Can you continue to provide support?
Rodriguez could hear enemy fighters literally climbing the rocks below her position, their equipment rattling as they worked their way up the final approaches.
Chen had shifted to using his knife, his pistol ammunition nearly exhausted, but he continued to delay the enemy advance with everything he had.
Affirm, ground element. I've got a few more rounds to expend.
That was perhaps the greatest understatement in military history. Rodriguez chambered round 32 and began the most intense sequence of precision shooting ever attempted in combat conditions.
She could see the patrol beginning to move, using the confusion created by her systematic elimination of enemy leadership to break out of their surrounded position. But enemy fighters were still in positions where they could bring devastating fire to bear on the moving Americans, and Rodriguez was their only protection.
Shot 32 eliminated a sniper who was tracking the moving patrol through his own scope. Shot 33 took down a fighter with an RPG who was preparing to engage the Americans as they moved across open ground.
This is the book It's About History, MOP History's known.
Each shot was calculated not just for accuracy,
but for maximum effect in protecting the patrol's movement. Rodriguez could hear enemy fighters reaching the upper portions of her ridge, their voices close enough that she could distinguish individual words.
Chen was fighting a desperate close-quarters battle to keep them from reaching the sniper position. But the mathematics of the situation were becoming impossible. Shot 34 eliminated a machine gun team that was attempting to engage the moving patrol.
Rodriguez worked the bolt action while bullets impacted within inches of her position. Enemy fire from both the valley and the approaching assault team, creating a crossfire that should have made accurate shooting impossible. But Rodriguez had transcended normal human limitations, entering a zone of focus and precision that military psychologists would later study but never fully explain.
Every shot was perfect. Every target chosen for maximum tactical effect. Every bolt manipulation smooth and efficient despite the chaos erupting around her position.
Shot 35 was taken while an enemy grenade exploded just 20 feet from her position, showering her with rock fragments and debris.
The target was an enemy commander at 734 yards who was attempting to coordinate fire on the breaking patrol, and Rodriguez made the shot without flinching despite the concussion that left her ears ringing.
"Maria, they're right on top of us."
Chen's warning came as he engaged an enemy fighter with his knife.
The close-quarters combat was now happening within yards of the sniper position. But Rodriguez continued her systematic engagement of targets in the valley. Through her scope, she could see that the patrol's breakout was succeeding. Captain Morrison's soldiers were moving in tactical bounds toward defensible terrain, using the confusion created by Rodriguez's shooting to escape the killing ground of the valley floor. But they were still vulnerable to long-range fire from surviving enemy positions. Shot 36 eliminated the last enemy machine gunner who was in position to engage the moving patrol. Rodriguez chambered round 37 while enemy fighters reached the final approaches to her position, their assault about to overwhelm the sniper team through sheer numbers and determination. But she could see through her scope that the patrol had reached relatively safe ground, establishing a defensive perimeter on high terrain where they could defend themselves effectively. Her mission was essentially complete. She had provided the fire support necessary to allow 12 American soldiers to escape from what should have been certain death. Rodriguez made one final decision that would cement her place in military history. Instead of attempting to save herself by engaging the immediate threats to her own position, she used her remaining ammunition to ensure that the enemy could never reorganize in effective pursuit of the escaped patrol. Each shot was placed with the same precision that had characterized the entire engagement, proof that Rodriguez could maintain her accuracy even under the most extreme conditions. As she chambered what would be her final round, enemy fighters reached the crest of the ridge and prepared to overrun the sniper position. Chen had fought with everything he had, but he was now out of ammunition and facing multiple attackers armed with automatic weapons. Rodriguez took her 41st and final shot at an enemy fighter who was in position to direct pursuit of the escaping patrol. The shot was successful, eliminating the last organized threat to the American soldiers who were now safely established in defensive positions. But as she worked the bolt to chamber another round, Rodriguez discovered that her ammunition was finally exhausted. 41 shots, 41 hits, 25 confirmed kills, and complete disruption of a coordinated enemy attack that should have resulted in the annihilation of an entire American patrol.
The enemy fighters reached the sniper position just as Rodriguez and Chen prepared to make their final stand with whatever weapons they had left.
But the sound that filled the mountain air wasn't gunfire. It was the distinctive whop-whop-whop of helicopter rotors as close air support arrived on scene, summoned by the patrol's desperate radio calls for assistance.
The Apache attack helicopters appeared over the ridge like avenging angels, their 30mm chain guns and Hellfire missiles turning the tide of battle in seconds.
Enemy fighters who had been preparing to overrun the sniper positions suddenly found themselves under attack from above, scattering for cover that no longer existed. Within minutes, the engagement was over. The enemy force had been scattered or destroyed. The American patrol was safe in defensive positions, and Rodriguez had achieved something that military historians would debate for years: the most effective single sniper engagement in recorded military history. As the dust settled and rescue helicopters arrived to extract both the patrol and the sniper team, Rodriguez sat behind her Mk-13 rifle and tried to process what had just happened.
41 shots in the space of less than an hour, each one calculated and precise despite conditions that should have made accurate shooting impossible. But the numbers didn't capture the real story.
The real story was about 12 American soldiers who went home to their families because one person refused to accept that the impossible couldn't be achieved when the stakes were high enough and the training was thorough enough to meet any challenge.
The helicopter extraction came 2 hours after the last shot was fired. 2 hours during which Rodriguez sat behind her Mk-13 rifle and tried to comprehend what had just happened in the mountains of Afghanistan.
The Apache attack helicopters had scattered the remaining enemy fighters, but the tactical assessment teams that arrived with the rescue force would spend days trying to understand how one sniper had single-handedly broken a coordinated attack by a numerically superior enemy force.
Sergeant First Class Chen was the first to speak, his voice carrying a mixture of exhaustion and awe. Maria, in 18 months of working together, I've never seen anything like what just happened.
Hell, I don't think anyone has ever seen anything like that. Rodriguez didn't respond immediately. She was systematically cleaning her rifle, performing the maintenance routine that had been drilled into her through years of training.
Her hands moved automatically through the familiar motions while her mind processed the engagement from a tactical perspective, analyzing what had worked and what could have been done differently. The rescue team included a sniper instructor from the Army Marksmanship Unit, Master Sergeant Williams, who had flown in specifically to conduct an after-action assessment of the engagement.
Williams had trained some of the best snipers in the military, but even he was struggling to understand what he was seeing in the preliminary reports. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, Williams approached her position with the kind of respect reserved for someone who had just redefined the possible.
I need to ask you some questions about your engagement sequence. The numbers I'm seeing don't match anything in our tactical doctrine. Rodriguez looked up from her rifle maintenance.
What numbers, Master Sergeant?
Williams consulted his tactical notebook. 41 shots fired, 41 hits confirmed by aerial reconnaissance, 25 enemy killed in action, complete disruption of a coordinated attack by an estimated 35 to 40 enemy fighters.
All accomplished in approximately 57 minutes while under direct fire and threat of being overrun.
The statistics were accurate, but they didn't capture the complexity of what had actually happened during those 57 minutes. Rodriguez had operated in a zone of focus and precision that transcended normal human limitations, making split-second calculations and executing shots that pushed the boundaries of what was physically possible with a bolt-action rifle.
The rifle performed as designed, Master Sergeant. The training prepared me for the conditions.
I had excellent intelligence from my spotter, and the tactical situation required rapid engagement of multiple targets. Williams shook his head.
Staff Sergeant, you're describing this like it was a routine engagement, but our best estimates suggest you averaged one accurate shot every 87 seconds, including time for target identification, range estimation, ballistic calculation, and bolt manipulation.
That's not just exceptional. It's unprecedented. What Williams didn't mention, but what everyone on the rescue team understood, was that Rodriguez had maintained that rate of fire while enemy fighters were climbing toward her position with the specific intent of killing her.
If we were adepter, we would give many to the persona service.
She had continued providing precision fire support for the trap patrol, even when her own survival was in immediate jeopardy. Captain Morrison arrived at the extraction site as the helicopter crews prepared for departure.
The patrol leader looked like he had aged 10 years during the engagement, but his soldiers were alive and accounted for.
He approached Rodriguez with the expression of someone who understood that he owed his life to extraordinary skill and courage.
Rodriguez, I need you to know what your shooting meant down there.
When the ambush started, we were dead. Completely surrounded, outgunned, no cover worth mentioning.
I was calculating how many of my people I might be able to get out alive, and it wasn't a good number. Morrison paused, looking across the valley where the engagement had taken place.
But then you started taking down their leadership, their heavy weapons, their coordination. Every shot you made bought us time, reduced their pressure, gave us hope.
By the time you finished, we had gone from being surrounded and facing annihilation to being able to break out and reach defensible ground. The captain's assessment was confirmed by the tactical reconstruction that intelligence analysts would complete over the following weeks.
Rodriguez's systematic elimination of enemy leadership and heavy weapons had broken the coordination of a carefully planned attack, turning a potentially devastating defeat into a tactical victory that demonstrated the decisive effect that superior marksmanship could have on the battlefield. But the personal cost of the engagement was something that Rodriguez was only beginning to understand.
The intense focus required for precision shooting under extreme stress had taken a psychological toll that wouldn't become apparent until later. The weight of responsibility for 12 lives, the pressure of performing at superhuman levels, and the knowledge that failure would have meant catastrophic consequences, all of these factors combined to create a mental burden that would require time and support to process fully.
Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a military psychologist who specialized in combat stress, arrived with the tactical assessment team to evaluate Rodriguez's mental state immediately following the engagement.
Mitchell had studied the psychological effects of extreme performance under pressure,
But Rodriguez's case would become a unique opportunity to understand how the human mind adapted to unprecedented stress. Maria, what I want you to understand is that what you accomplished today pushed beyond normal human limitations. The combination of physical skill, mental processing, and emotional control required to maintain that level of performance under those conditions represents something that we don't fully understand from a psychological perspective. Rodriguez looked at Mitchell with curiosity rather than concern.
Ma'am, it felt like every training scenario I'd ever been through just accelerated and compressed.
The fundamentals were the same: breathing, trigger control, ballistic calculation, target prioritization. The only difference was the speed and the stakes. Mitchell made notes in her assessment file. That's exactly what makes this case so remarkable. You maintained fundamental shooting disciplines under conditions that should have made those disciplines impossible to execute.
The stress response that typically degrades fine motor control and cognitive processing seemed to have the opposite effect on your performance. The psychological analysis would continue for months, but the immediate conclusion was that Rodriguez had demonstrated a combination of natural ability, intensive training, and mental discipline that had allowed her to perform at levels that redefined what was considered possible for a single sniper in combat conditions.
The tactical implications of the engagement were equally significant. Military analysts from around the world would study Rodriguez's shot sequence to understand how one person had neutralized a coordinated attack by a numerically superior enemy force. The engagement would become a case study in precision fire support, target prioritization, and the decisive effect that exceptional marksmanship could have on the battlefield. Master Sergeant Williams completed his tactical assessment 3 days later, and his report would become required reading at every sniper school in the military.
Staff Sergeant Rodriguez demonstrated a combination of technical skill, tactical understanding, and mental discipline that represents the highest possible achievement in precision marksmanship. Her engagement sequence redefined our understanding of what a single sniper can accomplish under extreme conditions.
But beyond the tactical analysis and psychological evaluation, there was a human story that would resonate through the military community for years to come. Rodriguez had saved 12 lives through a combination of skill, courage, and determination that transformed an impossible situation into a victory that demonstrated the best of military service. The medals and commendations would come later: the Distinguished Service Cross, the Bronze Star with V device for valor, and recognition for military leadership at the highest levels. But for Rodriguez, the real measure of success was simpler and more profound. 12 American soldiers had gone home to their families because she had refused to accept that the impossible couldn't be achieved. 6 months later, Rodriguez was reassigned to the Army Marksmanship Unit as an instructor, where she would pass on the skills and mental disciplines that had made her legendary performance possible. Her students would learn not just the technical aspects of precision shooting, but the mental framework that allowed exceptional performance under pressure. The story of what happened in the mountains of Afghanistan would be told and retold, each version adding details and perspective, but none capturing the full reality of those 57 minutes when one person redefined what was possible with a rifle, a scope, and the determination to protect the lives of fellow soldiers.
Rodriguez never spoke publicly about the engagement, preferring to let the tactical reports and official assessments tell the story.
But privately she understood that the mountains of Afghanistan had taught her something profound about the intersection of training, courage, and human potential. When the stakes were high enough and the preparation was thorough enough, the impossible could become possible through the application of skill, determination, and an unwavering commitment to the mission and the people who depended on its success. The Mk-13 rifle that had delivered 41 perfect shots under impossible conditions was eventually retired to a place of honor at the Army Marksmanship Unit, where it served as a reminder that exceptional equipment in the hands of an exceptional person could achieve results that transcended normal limitations. But the real legacy of that day in Afghanistan lived on in the soldiers who Rodriguez trained, the tactics that were refined based on her performance, and the understanding that human potential, properly developed and applied, could overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. The legend of Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez and her 41 shots became more than just a military story. It became a testament to the power of preparation, the importance of mental discipline, and the extraordinary results that were possible when someone refused to accept that protecting others was impossible, regardless of the odds or the circumstances. In the end, that might be the most important lesson of all, that the impossible becomes possible when someone cares enough to make it so.